another episode of Splash Considerations. My name is Justice De Los Santos, San Francisco Giants beat reporter for the Bay Area news group San Jose Mercury News, East Bay Times, whatever you want to call us, as long as you read, as long as you subscribe. And the Giants have returned from their three-city, nine-game road trip. They went 4-5, but as I mentioned in the last podcast episode with John Shea, this team's starting to find a little bit of its identity. Showed a little passion, a little fire, a little edge in Cincinnati. Eric Miller cussing out the entirety of the Reds team. JT Brubaker getting a little feisty with the home plate umpire and Spencer Steele. Landon Roop saying a fastball slipped. The fastball didn't slip. We all know it didn't slip. He just couldn't say it. And then they go to DC. They take 2 of 3, and you've got Tony Vitello shadow boxing with Drew Gilbert. He's getting pumped up after a big win. So this Giants team, 20 or so games into the season, is finally showing some spunk, finally showing a little bit of fire, a little bit of desire. But against this next team, you're going to need a little more than just emotion to beat them, because this next team is, of course, the reigning back-to-back champions, the supervillains of baseball, the Los Angeles Dodgers. And here to discuss this upcoming series with me, someone who now lives in LA, but the heart's from the Bay. Sonja Chen of MLB.com, Dodgers beat reporter for the website. Sonja, how we doing?
Doing great, Justice. Always great to be back in the Bay. This is my childhood bedroom right here. So,
I did ask you. I was like, wait, that doesn't look like a hotel background. That looks like a childhood bedroom.
yes, yes. It's always nice to have one night not in a hotel when you can on a trip. So, it's not a long time, but I'll take whatever I can get.
Amen to that. Amen to that. And obviously, this is the first time that the Giants and the Dodgers have had an opportunity to play each other this year. I think last year we had to wait until like May or even June. Like, it weirdly took a long time for these two teams to play each other, but they're getting this first series of the year against each other out of the way this weekend at Oracle Park. But before getting into that, Sonja, I do want to kind of peel back the curtain a little bit on your end, because this is your second season covering the team. Obviously, the Dodgers won the damn thing last year. So I can only imagine, it's one thing to be on a beat for your first year. It's another for that to be your first year on a beat. So I kind of wonder, like, what was that first season like for you overall? And what is just this experience of kind of diving headfirst into this team, like right when they're in the midst of their dynasty? What has this all been like for you?
Well, I think probably the best way to sum it up is that so many people this year, not the people on my beat, but people from other beats, their first time like seeing me in a while, a lot of them have been like, "So, is this like year 3 for you on the beat?" Which no, it's not, but in some ways it does kind of feel like that. Definitely last year could have been multiple years for so many teams, You start the season in one country, Japan. You spend most of it obviously in the United States, and then you end it in a third country, Canada. So, that kind of perspective for me, like I looked back and it was just like, wow. And the thing about covering the Dodgers is there's just so much happening with this team every day. It feels like you're never really searching for what to write about. So when you have all that in your first year on a beat, it's like, I mean, is it a little overwhelming at times? Yes, but you just can't ask for much more. It's incredible to see like everything I got to see last year. I try to reflect on it every now and then, and it's amazing. And this year, could see some more history if they could actually three-peat, which it's too early to say, in my opinion, but I don't know. We'll all be watching.
I don't know if Giants fans want to hear that, but that is the truth of the matter. And as you mentioned, this Dodgers team, you are very rarely searching for any news. And we obviously got some news today. We're recording on Monday afternoon. And, there's a lot of new faces, or rather old faces with this team. There's a lot of familiar faces, but two of the newer ones are Edwin Diaz, Kyle Tucker. We will not be seeing Edwin Diaz during this series. We will not be seeing Edwin Diaz when the Giants go to LA next month. Sonja, what's the latest on the three-time All-Star closer?
Yeah, so I am obviously not in Colorado right now, but the Dodgers announced today that he is not only going on the injured list with loose bodies in his right elbow, but he's also having surgery to address that, and they're expecting him back in the second half. So, I think that prognosis and diagnosis are kind of more on the encouraging side as long as that actually fixes the problem, which for him has been that his velocity has been down, pretty concerning amount early in the season. Of course, we won't really know if this is the thing that addresses the issue until later in the year. But I think having an answer is a good thing because up until this point, the team said that he had been feeling something in his right knee, which was the one that he had surgically repaired 3 years ago after injuring it in the WBC celebration. So we had heard that, but other than that, you know, the Dodgers were not saying that this was injury related at all, and that might have been more concerning than, if there was something you could point to. So now there's some sort of cause with the elbow. In 2 to 3 months, we'll see, like, is he getting back to the Edwin Diaz that we've seen in the past? So it's obviously a blow for the Dodgers to lose your closer, but for the Dodgers are probably one of the few teams that can kind of withstand something big like this. So we'll start to see the solution in the ninth inning, starting with this series in San Francisco.
Yeah, I think it had been like because he pitched yesterday being Sunday, and I think it had been 9 days in between outings. And I even when I was looking at his game logs, like I just assumed he was injured because it had been so long. But apparently he was dealing with whatever he was dealing with. And now, as you mentioned, they kind of have some semblance of a solution. So you mentioned this is going to be their first series as far as Edwin Diaz being on the injured list. What do you foresee going forward, kind of being the Dodgers' game plan in the ninth inning, and even how that kind of affects how they approach the eighth inning and even the seventh inning as well?
Yeah, so I think the way that I see it now is I'm sure that the messaging will mostly be that it's closer by committee, but I think that the closer will essentially be Tanner Scott when it makes sense, which is kind of what they were saying last year. There were very few times when they actually called Tanner Scott the closer, but he was, in reality. And I think that's what's going to happen when with Diaz out this year. So I guess the biggest issue there then is Tanner Scott has looked a lot better this year, and I am one of those people who really hates to like draw too many conclusions from a small sample size, and we're in April, so I don't want to say that making however many like good outings in April means that he's going to have a good season, but I'll just say he looks better. But I think a big part of that has been that he's been able to pitch in more kind of favorable lanes, have more like left on left matchups because Diaz has been anchoring that ninth inning. So now how you work backwards from there. I think the problem then becomes whether like the Dodgers have a reliable right on right reliever because, Diaz obviously in the ninth was kind of that and neutral enough where he can be the closer regardless of situation. But then there's some responsibility that falls on Blake Trinan, who had 8 scoreless appearances before a bad one yesterday in Colorado. And after Trinan, when you're looking at right-handers in the bullpen, a lot of them are very unproven. There's Will Klein, Edgardo Enriquez, Kyle Hurt, who's just recently back from Tommy John surgery. So this is, it's both like an opportunity, but a problem, and it's probably going to come with some growing pains as the Dodgers figure out who that right-hander who's tough on right-handed hitters can be.
Didn't Blake Trinan also like just get hit in the head in batting practice like yesterday? Didn't he get like catch a stray?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I'm only laughing
So
because I think he's okay. I think he's okay. That's why I'm
he's
like kind
okay.
of
Yeah.
okay. That's
I
why I'm
mean,
kind of
I
laughing
don't want to
about.
blame yesterday's outing on that, like unless he does. But yes, I think on Saturday he got hit.
Not ideal, but he's a reliever. They're not expected. I mean, you kind of got to keep your head on a swivel, like at least a little bit. I don't know exactly how it happened, but Blake Trinan appears, at least of right now, appears to be okay. Also, shout out real quick to Will Klein because the Pokemon glove, like the how it has like the sleeve in it, uh, that might be a game changer. I saw Jacob Mizorowski have that as well. So shout out to Will Clan. And also those fans in Toronto that were like throwing in Pokemon cards. So anytime like you find out like because they're obviously human beings too, and anytime you can find out they're a fan of the stuff you were a fan of growing up, always a great feeling. Let's transition to another new face who we actually will see this weekend at Oracle Park, and that is one Kyle Tucker. Depending on your perspective, him joining the Dodgers might have been the story of the offseason for better or for worse. There's obviously a lot of dialogue centered around that at for a 4-year, $240 million contract, the highest AAV of anybody in the history of the game for someone who, again, depending on how you evaluate and you value, might not be a top 20 player. I think at his best he can be, but based off how the last couple of years ago, yada yada yada. Anyway, it was kind of just another example of the Dodgers really just flexing their might, flexing their super villain nature, if you want to call it that. And it was a bit of a slow start, but the last 15 games, 288 batting average, 843 OPS, 3 homers, almost as many walks as strikeouts. Sonia, what have your first impressions been of Kyle Tucker and how he kind of fits into this Dodgers ecosphere so far?
The thing about Kyle Tucker is I feel like you can almost forget he's there sometimes. And
The
part of
$240
that is,
million man, forgetting about him.
I know, it's like any other team makes a contract like that during the off season, like whoever signs that contract is going to be like the talk of spring training. This year, he was even there the whole time, unlike, some of the players who went to the WBC, and he still just kind of flew under the radar. And I think that's probably one of the best possible things for him in this situation, you know? Um, but to me, he just feels like someone who kind of quietly goes about his work. He's not a super expressive guy. Even Dave Roberts has said as much. Like I think early in spring training, he's like he's probably not going to give you guys any good quotes.
Just
Which
straight up.
yes, he did. He said something like that,
Oh my
and
God.
you know what? And this is not me criticizing Kyle. Yeah, that's kind of true.
You
But
got to call a spade a spade. Some guys, just objectively speaking, can talk a little, a little more, a little expressive.
yeah, yeah. So I don't know. He's again, he flies under the radar. I feel like we definitely haven't seen him like do kind of what he's been like advertised to do as far as being like an impact bat, but I don't know. I think, he's going to get there. And the thing is with this team, like even if he doesn't, by some chance, they're going to be just fine. So it's like a weird place to be with someone who's getting paid like a star player and on many other teams would be like the biggest name associated with the team. But I think that him being able to fade into the background a little could actually be good for him.
I think as you mentioned, in for any other team in baseball, the guy making $60 million a year would probably be the guy that's making most of the headlines to start a season, especially in a position group. But he's kind of had his thunder taken from him a little bit from that perspective because there's another outfielder on this team that's been kind of quietly, even more quietly, maybe kind of setting the world on fire, and that's Andy Pajes. He is currently leading the majors with a 382 batting average. His OPS leads the National League. He leads the majors in RBIs. And it's he's coming off a breakout season last year. But, when the postseason rolled around, it was just objectively, it was not good. I think his OPS was 211. He was losing playing time down the stretch of the postseason run, but now he's, obviously he's not going to sustain, probably not going to sustain the numbers that he is, but he's providing offense at a premium position. It seems like he's taken even another step forward. Just what have you seen out of Andy Pajes to begin this season? Someone that's already won NL Player of the Week.
hmm Yeah, Andy Pajes, I mean, he really impressed me last year, to be honest, because just as you mentioned, as he ended the season on such a poor note, he also started the season really badly to the point where I think in the first like road trip of the year, there were like legitimate questions over whether he should be optioned to AAA. But yeah, it's really hard to be like kind of a sleeper on a team like the Dodgers where you know so much about just about every player on the team. But yeah, Pajas is kind of that. He's under the radar. He's developed into a really good center fielder after, for most of the time he was developing. Like the belief was that he would stick in a corner spot. And I think that, his arm could really play up if he were in right field, but he's doing really well at center field, and right now I think he's like undoubtedly the Dodgers' best option there. And this season at the plate, I think the most impressive thing has been just his plate discipline looks so much improved from last year. He's spoken about like spending hours hitting off the trajectory, like doing it daily in the off season during spring training. He said that he always faces Paul Skeens because of the
Really?
movement that Skeens has. Yeah. So he like focuses on Paul Skeens and whoever the pitchers that he's facing on a given day might be, which I found really interesting. But I think you really have like seen that work pay off because he's in again like a smaller sample size. He's kind of cut down on the swing and miss. Like he still does that because you're not going to get rid of it entirely, but just the swing decisions look so much more advanced than they were a year ago. And, you remind yourself too that he's still very young. He's still 25 years old. So it's just very impressive to see the growth over the past year.
There's another 25-year-old on this Dodgers roster that I want to talk about, someone that has also been putting up just even more unsustainable numbers. And that's one Dalton Rushing. Now, Sonja, I don't know if you're privy to the catcher conversations that have been happening in the Bay Area. A lot of dialogue with Patrick Bailey and Daniel Susac. We are not going to open up that can of worms here, although it's pretty much been already it's well been opened, starting with kind of the last podcast. But Dalton Rushing has 5 homers in 7 games. He has an OPS plus of 368. That is not going to sustain. He will probably come back down to earth at some point.
Yo! Hold up! Time out! Time out!
Sorry for the quick interruption, but I'm currently editing, at least, finalizing editing the podcast slash video, however way you're consuming it right now. And I just wanted to note super quickly that Dalton Rushing didn't just homer tonight. He hit his 6th and 7th homers tonight. So he's up to 7 homers in 8 games or 22 at bats, whatever it is. Just off to a completely and totally ludicrous start to the season. I just thought that the timing was absolutely hilarious for me to say what I said about him not being able to sustain it. Now, obviously, he's still not going to be able to sustain. I think his WRC plus or OPS plus is probably going to be above like 400 with these 2 homers today. I don't expect him to sustain that at all, but I just found it absolutely hilarious that hours after I said he couldn't sustain what he was doing, he just continued to do what he had been doing, which was continue to hit home runs. So just wanted to make that point super quickly. Again, I think the point at whole stands. I don't think we're going to see Dalton Rushing break the single season OPS record, but just thought it was very funny. So now let's get on with the rest of the podcast. When, I don't know, but how do the Dodgers kind of see, their catching situation unfolding? Because Rushing was obviously a top draft pick, a top prospect, but you also have Will Smith behind the plate, who's one of the best offensive catchers in baseball. And, there's a certain guy, maybe we'll get to him a little later in the show, that typically always will occupy the DH spot. So how do the Dodgers kind of see this going forward, balancing playing time with someone that's a proven offensive force behind this backstop between some a kind of more of a up and coming catcher behind the backstop?
Well, first I'll start by telling you what Dalton said after what ended up being pretty much a career game in Toronto, 4 hits, 2 home runs. He said, and he was joking, well, it's all downhill from here.
Self-awareness. We love it.
Yes, and as it turns out, I think he's still on the ascent. Like as you said, these numbers would not appear to be sustainable over a full season.
Probably not.
But yeah, but the fact that he's even able to put them up in this small sample is very impressive, and we didn't see him do anything like that with kind of similar playing time last year. So that to me is like a big step forward for him. Now, the playing time, Will Smith is usually starting like 2 of 3 games in a series, and then Dalton Rushing is catching the other one. So Dalton plays about twice a week. And that's obviously a very difficult thing for any young player who's used to being an everyday player to adjust to. It's something that he really tried to embrace last year, but I think that he still kind of had issues with not knowing when his time would be on a given night and like being able to get in a rhythm with such limited opportunities to get his feet under him. So the way that he's like approached the role, I think he's really just embraced what it means to be a backup, even though he does not want that to be, you know, his outlook as a major leaguer in the future. And the mindset change has, I think, led to us seeing, who he was supposed to be at the plate, um, as a major leaguer. Because I remember like one of the things that was said about him when he was still in the minor leagues was like he's hit at every level, he's going to hit in the big leagues. And last year he didn't. Now we're seeing some good things happen for him.
Sonia, I think we're about 25, 30 minutes into this podcast. We have not mentioned Shohei Ohtani yet. I wanted to see like how long we could get into this before like mentioning him. We obviously have to mention him at some point. Like this is a Dodgers episode. I don't think you can have a discussion about the Dodgers without talking about this man at least once. And it's kind of like you shrug your shoulders. It's like, what else can you say about him? Like he has a 915 OPS, 5 homers. He's reached base in 51 consecutive games dating
Hmm.
back to last year. Again, we're recording before they play tonight. So if you hear this and the streak is over, don't blame us. That's just when we were talking. On the mound, he's allowed 1 earned run over 18 innings. It's a .50 ERA. The stuff is as electric as ever. And I think the most interesting way to kind of tackle Ohtani, instead of just being like, oh yeah, like it's great. Like we know he's great, but this is obviously his first time pitching full time since 2023. As far as the beginning of a season to the end of a season, obviously he started pitching again last year. We saw him in the postseason. But what has been the Dodgers' kind of plan with him as far as getting him from the beginning of a season to the end of a season healthy? Because it's one thing for him to come into a middle of a season, pitch 2 innings here, 3 innings there, and then you get to the postseason, it's full go. It's another for him to, appear to be making, an honest attempt at a full season's workload on the mound.
Hmm. Yeah, I think the main approach to it for the Dodgers has been like be pretty deliberate from the outset. Like have kind of a regimented plan in place. And it's actually very similar to what we saw with his return to pitching last year, where he was kind of just like a multi-inning opener at first. So he went 1 inning once, then 1 inning, then 2 innings, then two again, and so on until he was making full starts, and it took like 2 months about. So it's obviously not that from like workload, but just the way that they're kind of mapping out his starts right now, he's been going once a week. I think, ideally want him to get like 6 or 7 days of rest in between starts. And no matter how good he's looked, that's not going to change how often he pitches right now. And that can be a really a difficult thing when so far he's given them 3 innings each start. Like you said, just the 1 earned run, like he has looked fantastic. So I'm sure there's some voice at the back of their head that's like, what if we did have him more on like a 5 days rest schedule, something like that. But that is the problem with Ohtani. Like he's so talented at what he does on both sides that having some restraint in how you use him, I think, is one of the important parts to having like a sustainable performance from him. So we're seeing, yeah, deliberate approach early. I'm sure for the next couple of months it'll be similar. And then once we get to the postseason, then maybe things change a little.
I think it was his last start or maybe two starts ago that I think it was the one against the Mets where he was quote unquote only pitching. And I think that was because he got hit in his shoulder a couple days prior. Is that kind of going to be a one-off, or is the plan for us to maybe see a little more of these again, quote unquote, only pitching days?
I think the idea is that for the most part, he'll be hitting and pitching on the same days. But, if there is something like last week when he was hit on, it was his right shoulder by a pitch, so it was throwing shoulder. Not that it affected him. When
Still a
things
good
like that
outing.
happen, yeah, yeah. When things like that happen, I think they're going to be a little more like cautious. So I think, you know, if there's anything like that where he's a little bruised, there's some sort of ache and pain, but it's not going to affect him as a pitcher, I think they will consider, sprinkling some of those days in where he's only pitching. Maybe Dalton Rushing gets to DH.
There you go.
But it probably won't be often. Like there would be some sort of like circumstance warranting it.
Obviously, back in 2024, he is the first full-time DH to win. He goes 50-50. This year, we haven't seen him steal a base yet. I don't know if he's even attempted one yet. And that does kind of make sense because, if we're talking about conserving the body, having to do a sprint, even if it's just 90 feet, it's taxing on the body, especially when you got to slide. Has there been any discussion about him just eliminating that part of his game entirely because he has to pitch? Or do you think every once in a while, kind of more so what we saw with the Angels in 2022 and 2023, we'll see it, but it's just not going to be as frequent, considering he also has to pitch?
I would be surprised if it went away like altogether, since he has the ability to do it. And I think Shohei Ohtani just loves doing things that, people are not expecting from him. But definitely it will be pretty diminished. I think if you look back to last year, like to when he started really ramping up on the mound, I think once he started facing hitters at some point in May, like that was really when he stopped running as much. Um, Wish I had the exact numbers in front of me, but I want to say like the vast majority of his stolen bases and attempts were like before that point in the season. So it's kind of like, when he was only a hitter, like
Quote
he
unquote
needed some
only.
other quote unquote only. He needed like some other outlet to, you know, be doing multiple things like at just a surprisingly good level. And now that he's back to pitching, and that's something that he has so much passion for, and that requires so much of his time, to work on, like the running has kind of fallen by the wayside a bit, but it probably won't disappear altogether.
I know I don't want to say never. I'm just gonna say we're probably not gonna see it, but I've always just kind of wondered, like, if we ever got like an Otani, like if he just said, "I'm not pitching, throw me in right field," or whatever, like whatever position you want to throw him in. I've always wondered like what that would look like because maybe there's an alternate path or alternate universe where he's like kind of just like a 300, 300, 400, 400 guy. But now we just have to settle for this timeline where he is, just, the only guy doing the two-way thing. Sonia, the last question I want to hit you with before we get out of here, and I ask this to every beat reporter who comes on this show. What is your biggest curiosity for the 2026 season? And you can interpret that question
Hmm.
in whichever way you would like, just the player, the theme, just the one element of this Dodgers team of which you are most curious.
This almost feels like such an obvious answer, but I think like the most interesting player on the Dodgers right now is Roki Sasaki,
Mm.
and just how he develops this year, how long the Dodgers can keep him in the rotation. these are things that I'm very curious to follow. And a lot of the time you think that you know how a situation will play out, like, just thinking like kind of bigger picture. Last year when the Dodgers had a chance to go back to back and it hadn't been done in a quarter century, it's like, I could see them falling short of that. I could also very realistically see them doing it, and then they did. This year with Sasaki, it just feels like there are so many different possible outcomes, and I, in many ways, I just don't know where the situation is going. I think a lot of it relies on him and his relationship with the team. And then there's also just the physical, like what is he capable of on the mound? Can he physically do what he was doing in NPB that made him so dominant there? And yeah, as the rotation gets healthier, like Blake Snell gets closer to coming back, I'm really curious to seeing how he looks over this next month or so and what, will make sense to do with him as the season goes on.
To kind of tie this back into the Edwin Diaz point, you mentioned that Blake Snell is going to be back in the mix as well, and this Dodgers team obviously does not lack for starting depth. Could you see a situation where Roki is just back in the bullpen and kind of might be called upon to be in that leverage role, especially with Edwin Diaz out for the rest of the first half?
I think I would be surprised if Roki was pitching out of the bullpen in the first half. I think I think right now kind of the team's message to him is like, we see you as a starter in the long term and like we're going to try to help you succeed in that. Like then he just needs to come through and perform. So I think that even if, you know, say Snell comes back, Roki Sasaki is not the one of the five best starters in the current six-man rotation. Like, I think then there's a case to possibly send him down to AAA. But if it's like near the end of the season, whether Roki is in the major leagues in AAA, they're still looking for this, right on right reliever, possibly aside from Diaz, or, if there's any like further complication with Diaz, it's hard to tell, 5, 6 months in advance. Um, I would say there's a chance then because it's a similar situation to last year. Like, hey, if you want to be part of this postseason run, like, we're going to need you to do this. And I could see that situation playing out.
We will not see Roki Sasaki pitch during this upcoming series. For those of you who are curious who's going for them, it's going to be Yoshinobu Yamamoto, Shohei Ohtani, and Tyler Glasnow. Three pretty good right-handed pitchers. So while we will not see Roki Sasaki on the mound, Sonja, I will see you in the press box tomorrow. I will probably have a Celsius or two in hand. Fabian's not making this road trip. He's big time on us. We got to settle for Katie Wu, who's from not even from the Bay. She's from Vacaville. Bernie,
Wow.
if she ever
You
tries to,
disagree.
I tell that to her face. Whenever she comes on this podcast, I'll tell it to her face. But anyway, Sonia, this was a lot of fun. Where can the folks find your work?
Well, you can find me at Sonja M. Chen on Twitter, aka X, or Instagram also. And then I'm also my articles are at MLB.com/Dodgers. So you can find me there.
You can find her there. Sonia, thanks for coming on.